Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our last webinar of 2025. Hoping everybody's going to have a good holiday season. And we are here today with our friends from TipHaus. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Yes, we are recording this. We will have it up on our website. And I'm dropping a link in the chat right now for where you can find it, and that will be up as soon as I can get it up after the webinar. Should be sometime this afternoon. You're also going to receive an email this afternoon or tomorrow morning that will have a link to this video and also the presentation slides. So if you miss anything, if you want to show it to somebody later on today, you can go ahead and have that option. If you guys have questions, go ahead and type it in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. We will answer the questions live when we are done with the presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Steve Hooper from TipHaus. We is joined by Greg Shear from Columbia Hospitality, and they're going to go ahead and take over. Good morning, Steve and Greg.
Good morning, Lisa. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
Great. And Greg, thank you so much for saying yes to a conversation with me and about kind of what we did together. I don't know, it was over a year ago now. I feel like we started working together on all this stuff, so it's
Yeah,
pretty fun to see it continue to go and whatnot. And obviously, you're such a you and then your company are just such great ambassadors of the hospitality industry globally. So just a pleasure to have you here with us. So thank you for that.
yeah. Thank you for having me.
So obviously we're here to talk about Tip House a little bit, but this isn't a sales pitch. I want folks to learn a little something and hopefully be able to find ways to improve their operations, whether it's using us or other things like that. And so today we're just going to kind of have a conversation about Tip House. I'm Steve Hooper, and that's a picture of me when I was 12. So thank you very much for joining us today. My background prior to Tip House, I was actually a Tip House customer. I was with Ethan Stoll Restaurants for a number of years, and I brought the software in myself. So kind of have this customer slash technology dynamic. Greg, love to kind of hear about you, your background, your journey, and I always see you twice on the screen. So
Yeah. I've been with Columbia Hospitality and out here in Seattle for about 5 or 6 years now, and have worked both at the property level and now with the home office in downtown Seattle, and covering a whole bunch of properties all over the Pacific Northwest and the rest of the United States. Um, so yeah, we've grown pretty considerably over the last couple of years, and finding some solutions to help us scale with that growth has been a big priority. So we actually got introduced to Tip House by chance. We took over a property that was already in use, and so through that we kind of got this great use case and found our way into the software, and yeah, it's just been kind of a natural fit for us. So yeah, excited to be here talking about it and chatting with y'all.
appreciate it. What was your first hospitality industry job?
My first hospitality industry job. So when I was 13 years old, I got a job scrubbing pots and pans and doing stuff at this. There was this Swiss guy named Jean-Paul Belmont who had a little bakery called Jean Paul's Pleasures in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I wish I was making that name up, but I'm just not. It really was called
Yeah,
that.
even at 13, that must have been funny.
Oh man, I enjoyed my time working at John Paul Pleasures. Yeah, it was great. So,
That's great. Tell us a little bit more about Columbia. I'm sure everyone knows you guys, given this is WHA and whatnot. But yeah, give us the lay of the land.
yeah, so Columbia Hospitality has started in Seattle. The first property we ever worked on was the Bell Harbor International Conference Center right down on the waterfront, and it's just kind of grown naturally from there. Our bread and butter is sort of boutique and unique properties, um, um, and we don't do a ton of work in the hard brands, although we're starting to get into that space as well, which has been super exciting. We also, we have a number of different verticals that are sort of adjacent to just restaurant and hotel hospitality. We have residential and some special venues. I mean, Bell Harbor itself is a conference center, but we've got a couple other conference centers and places like the Smith Tower down in Pioneer Square. So yeah, anyways, just a really really exciting, unique company and a lot of focus on quality and unique hospitality driven experiences.
Yeah, no,
So
I love the new one you guys did out in Woodinville, the Somme.
yeah, the
Super
Somme.
cool
That's
property.
definitely our biggest foray into the brand world. It's a Marriott autograph property, but it's stunning build, amazing food and beverage. Couldn't possibly ask for a better location. So I mean, yeah,
Yeah, pretty sweet what you guys are up to, and always excited to be at one of your properties.
yeah.
Um, and I guess given that breadth and variety, it probably leads to a fair amount of complexity because there's different types of operations and different styles of service and what that looks like and all that kind of thing.
hmm Yeah, I mean, speaking to that a little bit, our kind of the one of the mantras is we don't do anything cookie cutter. There's no such thing as a one size fits all solution, which, as you know, when you try to scale things, is great in theory, but can create some challenges. So, I think it's been one of the exciting things is trying to sort of find that fine line between where's a solution that can help us across a lot of different properties, even if there are a lot of disparate elements to those operations that you need to solve for on the day to day. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, TipHaus has kind of fit into that mold a little.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that, and we'll dig into how that plays out in the real world. So, we'd love to get set the stage. I know you have some properties that are leveraging what we do, and some that are still onboarding or evaluating and whatnot. And what is the world of property at Columbia look like without Tip House, and how do tips get dealt with in that environment?
Yeah. So, like I said, our operations, obviously we have, clear operational standards in terms of what we need to deliver on payroll and all that stuff, just like everybody else. But from property to property, depending on, who the talent is and the structure of the leadership, this may be more of an accounting process and it may fall more on the F&B leaders, and it might be somewhere in between where they're kind of dividing and conquering a little bit. But in any event, it is generally a manual process. It's a spreadsheet that somebody's entering into. They're pulling reports out of the POS system, which we also work with primarily silverware and toast POS, but we have Lightspeed and Micros and a few other properties that are kind of on some random stuff. So it really depends on the property specifically how they handle it, but generally speaking, it's manual and I mean, even as recently as when we made the switch to TipHaus, there's one hotel in downtown that was still doing paper slips at the end of the shift, dropping with their cash. A server was writing in, I'm tipping this person this much and this person that much, right? So
Yeah.
which, of course, it works. People have done it for a long time and have figured it out that way, but it's super time consuming, and obviously with that much human involvement, there's a lot of potential for error, which does happen, and of course we go back and make it right, but can't say that always inspires a ton of confidence when those things happen. So yeah, you're kind of playing catch up sometimes on that.
No,
Um,
totally. And
yeah.
I can appreciate that the complexity and the different dynamics, and then you're multi-state as well. So like compliance, it looks
Yep.
different in different geographies, I imagine.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, since there's no tip credit here, that makes things a little less complicated, but we do operate places where there is a tip credit, and then that's an added degree of nuance and complexity, and so yeah.
Absolutely. Um, so you were the official early adopter at Columbia of the Tip House program and getting it into the operations you were overseeing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how things changed as this got onboarded for those locations.
Yeah, I mean, from my personal experience with, one of the first properties that I actually onboarded it to. So not that one that I experienced where it was kind of already in place, but the next one where I put it in place and it hadn't been. And it happened to be that property I mentioned where they were doing things on paper prior. So um, um, it went from, the daily tip process was probably 20 or 30 minutes to compile all the data, pull reports out of, the timekeeping system, um, the POS and, then all the scans of the handwritten reports that everybody made and compile that all into a spreadsheet. I mean, probably 20 or 30 minutes a day that somebody was spending on that. And it went to, we have to check time cards regardless every day. We got to make sure that everybody punched in and out, and that doesn't change obviously with TipHaus. So that's about a 5 minute procedure of just filtering everybody's time cards to see if there's an error. Um, and so that's now the daily involvement in payroll. And at the end of the pay period, you just kind of ducking into TipHaus, making sure that everything aligns from the POS to what's pulled in over there, and assuming there aren't any hiccups, which there really haven't been in that property. It's about a 15-minute process at the end of the pay period. So you've gone from 30 minutes a day to like 30 minutes a month, which is pretty big jump in
You
in
can,
time savings.
I'm not great at doing math, but over the course of the year, that sounds like days.
Yeah, yeah,
Days you've
yeah.
got, which is, I mean, that's the whole hope, right? Of any software program is to set it and forget it on some level, right? Like you get to your point, time clocks will always be a thing,
Yep,
and they'll always. I just remember opening up the daily report every morning and seeing how many people forgot to clock out the day before and being like, ah.
yep.
But that will never change. And if there's any way we can take burden off of you, you can spend more time on the things that are driving the team forward or the business forward or those kinds of things.
Yep.
Uh, that's great. So you mentioned that property. There was one other thing we were doing. It was new at the time, actually, when we were onboarding. It was our QR code tipping had just
Yeah.
launched, and that was kind of a unique moment to test something, and would love to kind of hear about how that experience and what the decision making was for you and the team around that.
Yeah, I mean, so the QR code tipping we already had in place with another vendor. Um, um, that basically we had it set up where our housekeeping team and our engineering team had little business card sized cards that they could leave in the room when they did turn down service, or if they came and fixed a broken mini fridge or whatever. They could leave that for you, and it invites the guest to leave a comment, and if they're feeling generous, a gratuity for that person. Um, um, and so, TipHouse offering the QR code function, comes, basically at no extra cost. Once you've signed up for the regular TipHouse functionality. So it was kind of a no-brainer for us from that perspective. All the functionality was one-to-one, including, the branding, and the ability to have our unique branding attached to everything, the ability to accept comments about the team members, which is something that from a team member experience is really important to us. It's obviously we want our team members to make as much money as possible, and if people want to tip them, we want to facilitate a means for that to happen. But also, if people want to say like, hey, such and such was lovely. I saw her in the hall every morning, and she was so nice, and thank you so much. That kind of stuff is really important to us too, and so having that functionality there was really great. And then, the other advantage actually to TipHouse was this other vendor did not integrate with our timekeeping system. So there was kind of still a manual process with that, because it was, if you wanted to pool things, you still had to pull reports out of the timekeeping system and then enter everything into a spreadsheet to spread out the tips, which, is not really is a bit of a time savings because you don't have to manually figure out everybody's tips, but still, Tip House brought in a much slicker kind of process to it. So So yeah, overall that was also a huge win and one that we've been touting in a lot of places because that other vendor had been previously kind of the solution of choice for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been great.
And I think, you know, the thesis when we built that particular feature was that for a hotel operator like yourself, where you've got the F&B operations and in some locations big banquets and events and other things like that. That was our core product originally.
Mm.
But now we've got the opportunity to do the other parts of the property and sort of be an all-in-one solution for the whole property. And so really appreciate you guys jumping in and being an early tester and adopter of that program. And just glad to hear it's going well. And it does seem like the team doesn't mind hearing nice things said about them
Yeah,
when it
that's for
happens.
sure.
Um, in terms of the which here's the QR code thing, which I was supposed to switch to when asked that question, but we'll put that up for the moment. And then we'll just kind of get into the conversation here a little bit more. And so in terms of advice maybe. You've done a few implementations now and
Yep.
whatnot. Would love to, lessons learned. Like what went well? What are things that you've seen opportunities to make to implement better in future implementations? Like what kind of advice around how to make this a streamlined, successful kind of startup for anybody who's new to the program?
Yeah. So one of the things that we I think have done very successfully, and that's because of kind of just who Columbia Hospitality writ large is and how we try to handle everything. We came in with a very sensitive touch at a new implementation of any system that's going to affect, particularly if it's going to affect how people get paid. Obviously, that's just a deeply emotional subject and you're stepping into often unsteady ground, even if it seems like what you're doing makes total sense and whatever. Um, so I think making sure that the modeling for whatever the tip structure would be under this system was really well thought out and really clear to us before we rolled it out was a really important step because that allowed us to have some great conversations ahead of rollout and say, hey, this isn't happening tomorrow. In a month from now, this is going to change. Here's what those changes are going to be. You've got time to ask questions and clarify how this is going to go. And I mean, ultimately, we did have it in our minds that there might be some people who decide to themselves, oh, well, this isn't the system I thought, the system of compensation I thought I was going to be working in. So maybe this place isn't for me. And we wanted those people to genuinely have an opportunity to make that reflection and decide that for themselves, if that was the case for them. Luckily, we didn't run into any of that. I mean, generally, everybody's been on board with all the changes that came with this, and um, not that those changes were all that drastic. So yeah, I mean, I think communication obviously is always just the best strategy. One thing on the other side of that I think is important to be mindful of. One of the big selling points and advantages of TipHaus is the app that the individual team members get access to and the ability to kind of see into what are their earnings, sort of period to date, and also on an hourly basis. Particularly if you're in a pooled environment, that's an important kind of factor and understanding that. Um, so all that transparency is net huge positive improvement. But the important thing to remember with that is you know many of these folks may believe that they understand the math behind a tip pool system, and they don't always fully understand it, or maybe they don't understand just kind of how it's laid out in this system. So you have to be prepared to kind of one-on-one with a lot of people and walk them through exactly, okay, here's your transactions and where all your tips were, and then these were tip outs to, support staff and the culinary team, and then everything goes into a pool, and here's how those are distributed by hours and how the hours are weighted by position. And you have to really walk them through all that because, otherwise people are going to be looking at their check stubs that they saved from the end of their shift and then looking at the take home amount, and they're like, it's not the same. So you kind of gotta work with them a little bit to make sure that they understand that there's a clearly defined and logical system that's contributing to that. Once you do that, everybody generally starts to understand, and they're like, okay, that's great. Um, um, so that's one sort of lesson learned on it, and then the other one, and this is kind of just one of these like really nitpicky things, but it does keep coming up, is if you have an operation that runs continuously throughout the day. So you're going to do a shift change between AM, PM, for instance, and that happens at like 2 p.m. You got to make sure everybody knows that if they are working until 2:30, they're going to have a half hour on the PM tip pool, and if they're starting at 1:30, they're going to get a half hour on the AM tip pool. Because otherwise, you're going to get people who are saying like, "Hey, wait a minute, this person, you know, got money on my tip pool, and I don't understand why they were working a PM shift." And it's just a little bit of kind of semantics and logic to explain. But it's usually easy enough. It's,
Yeah.
hey, they were in here to do roll ups, so you had to do less side work at the end of your shift. So, you know, there you go, kind of thing.
Yeah, you're
Um,
welcome.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Totally. That makes
So
good
yeah,
sense.
those have probably been the biggest things. I mean, the
Yeah.
team's been great to work with. I mean, the AI tool that you guys have for answering questions is great, and then the direct customer service once it connects you with somebody is really wonderful too. So
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
appreciate
there
that.
yeah, it really hasn't been a challenge we ran into that we couldn't get past.
Yeah, no, and a big shout out to our customer success team. As I always like to say, towards the end of a uh, conversation on the front end, where I usually am in conversations with folks like yourself, um, I I love working with customers. And it's going to make me sad because you're going to like my CS team, my customer success team, even more, uh, because they're just so on top of it, and they love getting back to customers quick. Our average response time by a human is under 3 minutes across every customer request and whatnot. We really pride ourselves on getting people the information they need when they need it. And so I just want to give those guys a shout out. Um, Everyone says they have great service. I think we, try and live up to the standards we set for ourselves.
Yeah.
So beyond that, the you've got standalone restaurants and full hotels that you're utilizing us for and whatnot. And um, how kind of do you think things um, have, that transparency you mentioned a second ago, um, is one of the tenets of sort of what TipHaus was built on, giving team members access to the information because, seeing it in that one line on an Excel spreadsheet when they ask how much did I make in tips this week so far or whatever is always hard, both on the person who has to roll up all the other lines so they can't see anybody else's earnings and just kind of burns through time. But have there been sort of additional like, benefits in terms of like team members not having to ask so many questions about what their earnings were or things like, like reducing like turnover because people feel like there is like more, communication or knowledge that they have and things like that. Just curious if you've seen any effects like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that, previous to rollout at a number of different places where we've got this going now, um, sort of the hand-to-hand involvement in figuring out, well, did this person tip this person out? And, some of those questions you're asking about, you're talking about, I mean, that exact experience, having to pull up the spreadsheet, show people. I mean, all of that can become a pretty time-consuming process. And furthermore, when you have those kind of questions swirling around and people waiting for answers, that's a pretty fertile breeding ground for people to start speculating and talking to one another and creating these feelings of discontent where maybe there shouldn't be any of them. Maybe there is no real issue, and they just needed someone to show them. So it kind of does a lot towards that regard, and I think that's a ultimate net positive on the cultural aspect. You can kind of just focus on being a restaurant and on hospitality when you don't have a bunch of questions about this all the time. Obviously, we do still get questions like I was just outlining, and you do still have to spend some time on them, but I think it's less time investment overall, and I think the transparency is a big positive. Yeah.
That's great. Um, I guess, bigger, kind of broader, generally as it comes, because, as you mentioned, compensation and touching anything related to it is such a delicate, and I even remember the just sweating the annual meeting where like, minimum wage is going up. You have to talk to everybody about like their wages and just like sweating at every one of those meetings just because you're so
Yeah.
worried about all of the potential challenges. But in terms of, taking care of your team and that kind of stuff, what kind of a just general advice, like outside of this tip house conversation, where have you found kind of success in having those types of communications and conversations around compensation, whether it's the tip pools or service charges or other things like that, depending on the properties, and ensure like, getting people comfortable that you're still the good operator, you're still the good boss, you're not trying to screw them, right? Like all of that is so hard sometimes to message because it's their money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for sure. I think it's kind of one of these things where obviously you're taking what is in essence I mean it's finance, it's numbers, it's math, right? Like it is cold hard logical, all of that, and at the same time when it comes to the team member receiving that, it's deeply emotional. This is tied to their grocery bills and paying their rent so, um, I think when you get into all that, there's a lot of instances where you have team members that don't take the time to figure out something like what am I actually earning per hour in tips, and if I look at that next to my hourly wages, what am I earning? And it can kind of help reframe those conversations in a very useful way. Um, um, because it's also it's hard to sometimes have to broach that territory where you're like, look, you are making really good money, which is a conversation that sometimes we have to have, and
Yeah.
this helps with that. Or alternatively, if somebody has come to us and said, look, like this is what I need to be making, we can say, well, like this is what you are making, and let's make informed decisions around. So you can kind of transition the conversation back into a realm that's a little bit more guided by logic um, um, less just totally emotional, squishy kind of feelings driven territory. Which is also, from a management perspective, is really helpful. And obviously, I mean, from a team member retention perspective, being able to talk about, the fact that we have amazing earnings, including tips in a really of the minute kind of way, is really useful, and helps us kind of drive that team member satisfaction. And then it also helps on the recruitment side. When I can, turn to somebody who's, a seasoned, pro bartender, pro server, thinks in this way, thinks to themselves, how much am I going to earn per shift? And if I can say, well, on average, my bartenders earn, $40 an hour on top of their regular wages. That's a, okay, cool. I can picture what that's going to mean
Oh, I
for
can do
my,
that math.
yeah, I can figure out what that means for my Saturday night, right? So
Totally.
that's also a super, super useful function.
Yeah, that was like every good software company, we've got a little dashboard, and my favorite metric on there is tips by hour per job,
Yeah.
and whatnot, which we would utilize in my ESR days to like because you need to show potential like what is the earnings range and whatnot with the way Washington state law works and whatnot. And so that's an important thing to be able to show. Hey, here's what bartenders earned in their last pay cycle as a real number, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And from a process perspective too, when you're working, I mean, and it's easy to forget this because we're no longer in a tip credit state in Washington, but if you are in a state where you have to demonstrate that with tips you've earned above the regular minimum wage, which is what the tip credit process is, then that's so just a super, super useful way to be able to drop in and do that super quickly without having to
yeah, and
run everything.
we work through a lot of those states, and we have direct reports that are very like you kind of we can set all those things up in the process. So there's a few
Yeah.
questions in here I'm seeing, and thanks for jumping in. And one I wanted to just get to was the implementation and training timeline, because I think that's relevant for the early part of the conversation. I'll say. It can go as quickly or take as long as the collaboration requires. So, but I've seen a customer get stood up in a single 30-minute phone call because they had everything, all their ducks in a row coming into the call. But usually it's a week or two as a typical kind of implementation timeline, and then we're there to support and train. But with Greg, you've done this a few times with us now. Kind of what have your experiences been on from kickoff to sort of fully up and running within a new location?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's been obvious being on a number of those initial implementation calls that if we wanted to be up and running, by the end of the week kind of thing, we could have done that. I mean, one of the maybe double-edged swords of choosing to be a tech company in the hospitality industry is we are notoriously the slowest adopters of new technology, anywhere. But I mean, part of that is kind of what I was talking about earlier, that we want to be able to have those conversations with everybody and talk through everything and make sure everybody feels really good about what the new changes are going to be and all that. So generally speaking, our implementation process on this, once we've gotten the full green light to go ahead and get it moving, has been about a month or so because we generally want to at least give a full pay period, if not a little bit further, and then you got to coordinate schedules and make sure everybody's set up and stuff. So yeah, about a month has generally been the
Yeah,
framework.
and the in the 30-minute phone call is really for us on the TipHaus side. It's just about the ability to get the API connections. So we do the API connections every 15 minutes, all the data from your point of sale system and wherever the time and attendance is happening. As soon as we have all that data, setting up the rules, that it's that piece of the process is pretty streamlined, and then it's all about what is the rollout, how do we support you, how to get you the materials you need to give to your team members, and we can support you throughout all of that. So it's kind of it's a white glove service that we provide as it relates to onboarding and training. And it's a little go at your own pace because your operation is going to look different than the guy next door. And we know that as former operators ourselves. So we're here to just support whatever that looks like for you. Um, Related to the QR side of things, there are two good questions around this. One's on the branding, and the other is on ensuring allocation to the correct person or to the correct team and whatnot. So maybe starting on the branding side, you mentioned the logo and whatnot, but how customizable was the guest experience with the QR code?
Yeah, very. So like for instance, we wanted to make sure that it was only a first name that's on the cards and on the platform when you sign in. We didn't want to give people full names just for security reasons, obviously. So that was a really important point of customization. I mean, in terms of like, inserting, you can see in the QR code that's in the top right of Steve's screen, there's a logo right in the middle of the QR code. So we were able to customize that on ours to be the hotel brand logo. The overall colorway of the app is customizable, so you can match that to your brand colors. I forget if we were able to do font down to that level of detail, but I mean, by the time you've gotten into it, it looks like a branded app for the hotel specifically, and not some secondary platform um, um, sort of service. So from that perspective, yeah, very very customizable and great, and also the ways of implementation. So what we chose to do was build on Canva, like individual business card style cards for each person, and you can just drag and drop their individual QR codes in there, which is actually is speaking of your allocation question is also relevant, that you can do individual QR codes per team member, or you can do an individual QR code per team. So I could, put on my menus if I wanted to say like, hey, if you want to tip the kitchen, scan this QR code. So you could put a QR code on your menu and do that. You could put a QR code at your front desk and say, hey, if you want to tip the valet team or the front desk team or whomever, just scan this, and you could do a pool with that. And as I mentioned earlier, because TipHaus integrates with our timekeeping system, it's super easy to then say, okay, we've pulled in X amount of dollars to that pool, and all of these job codes had this number of hours per this number of team members during that. And so that makes the allocation process really slick and easy, um, um, which is great. And then obviously also you can do it individually by team member, in which case, the allocation process is pretty straightforward. I tipped this person $5, so that person gets five.
Yeah. Um, One more around kind of tip structuring and handling. Of the properties that you oversee at least, which one is kind of the most complex and have the most kind of variables in it, and how do you kind of support that?
Yeah. So we have there's a brewery operation, a brew pub operation that has, pub, a smaller restaurant, and then an offsite tap room as a third location, which are all separate and individual pools, and each has some unique aspect to how their pool is structured as well. So, the big pub has a larger tip out to the kitchen. The smaller restaurant is servers keep tips individually, but have a mandatory tip out percentage to support staff. And then the freestanding spot is just a straight pool, because it's really, it's two people who are pulling beers off taps and cooking hot dogs on a little grill, and they're doing everything themselves. Um, so um, so yeah, you kind of have, within the wider, forgetting the terminology, within the wider like location or enterprise level, maybe it is, you have individual locations. So there's drop down tabs where you can see, I can see the pub and I can see the smaller restaurant individually if I want. I can also see reports that roll up all three into one. So, I mean, you have all that functionality on the TipHaus side. There is definitely some legwork you end up having to do on making sure everybody's got the appropriate job codes. So that's definitely one thing I would um, um, bring to the conversation as you get into a more complex launch on this, is making sure that everybody understands how to schedule by job codes and how to punch in by job codes. Because obviously, if, in the example I just used, if somebody punches in as a bartender at one place, but they were actually working at the other, TipHaus isn't going to know they were at the other. So it's going to put them on the pool for the place where they punched in. we did learn that lesson the hard way a couple of times and have to go back and sort it out, which, of course we did. Um, um, but uh, but yeah, so figuring out kind of folks' job codes and how they're punching in, that's super critical process if you're getting into one of these, multi-outlet and separate rules for each one kind of scenarios.
Yep. No, that's fair. And yeah, I think, we definitely try and build functionality that allows you to just operate more efficiently, whether it's you're the GM of that one location and you want to just see what you're doing, or you're overseeing all of it, or you're seeing multiple properties. So you've got the visibility that you need and the granularity all the way down to the team member level. And we even have check level data. So, you can, let's say you have a sommelier that's in on Fridays and Saturdays and they get 10% of bottle sales during that time. You can be very granular with the way you break things out and whatnot. So that's sort of um, the way we've kind of designed our side of the program. But then we're constantly building new little features and functionality and other things like that. And some of the things Greg mentioned, like the first name only, since they were one of the early adopters of QR code. They're like, yeah, how about just the first name? And we're like, yeah, that sounds right. So we're gonna tweak that really quick. So we try to be very responsive to what folks are looking for, because at the end of the day, it's your operation, it's your team's money. Like, it has to work for you and it has to work for them. And if we're not doing that, then we're not really serving our customers in the way that you serve yours. So that's kind of how we look at the world. But anyways. Well, I think that was all of our Q&A. Greg, I can't thank you enough for your time, and the opportunity to work with you in Colombia has been a personal win and joy, because I just have so much respect for your guys' organization and the way you approach hospitality globally. It's just you
Thank you.
guys set a nice high bar for the rest of us, which is always great. So thank you for your time, and
Yeah.
I'll turn it
Steve,
back
I
over to
have a
you.
really quick question for you.
Sure.
If folks want to scan that QR code behind you, what will that lead you to?
Well, you'll get a chance to book a demo, and there's a free trial behind that if you want to take a look at it. We'll get plugged in with some of your data and show you how it all works. And if you're still on spreadsheets, I promise it's better. I really do. The 32 spreadsheets I had once upon a time was not the most fun part of the week.
Yeah.
And I did drop that link into the chat for anybody who's interested in just clicking on that right now. Thank you both so much for your time. Again, this will be up on our website later on today, and you will get an email. Oh, how long's the trial for?
2 weeks usually, but sometimes depending on what's going on, we can create a little more space if necessary to help you understand exactly how it's working and that kind of thing. Everyone gets busy, so but typically 2 weeks. Uh, QR codes is a little harder because you have to integrate banking information to be able to receive the tips and then get that information going. But if you have questions about the QR code side of things. Uh, so our QR code system is, yeah, directly tied to the tip money movement side of things. So we'll help you collect the tips and then deposit it to you so you can get onto payroll, or allow you to pay them out via our Earn Tip Access program, which is another webinar.
All right. Well, again, thank you both so much for your time and this information. Emails will go out with this a link to this video later on today or early tomorrow. There's also a link to a survey if you want to fill that out and see how we're doing with webinars. Thanks again and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.
Everybody, thank you.